The Indus Valley Civilization, a journey back in time. Let's travel back in time, thousands of years ago, to discover a fascinating ancient civilization called the Indus Valley Civilization. Imagine a time long before even your grandparents were born. The Big Discovery. In the 1820s, a British explorer named Charles Masson first spotted some mysterious mounds at a place called Harappa, which is in modern-day Pakistan. But it wasn't until about 100 years later, in the 1920s, that archaeologists really started digging there. Two important people, Daya Ram Sani and R.D. Banerjee, excavated Harappa and another amazing site called Mohenjo-daro. Their work was guided by Sir John Marshall. These discoveries showed that a great civilization lived in India about 4,500 years ago. However, some newer digging at a place in Haryana called Burana makes experts think this civilization might be even older, around 8,000 years old. Burana is now thought to be the oldest Indus site. Where was it? At first, people thought this civilization was only near the Indus River, but as more digging happened, they found it was spread over a much bigger area. Important Indus sites include Kotdiji, Amri, and Mohenjo-daro, all in Pakistan today. In India, sites like Burana, Banawali, and Rakhigarhi are in Haryana. Rupar is in Punjab, Alamgirpur in Uttar Pradesh, Kalibangan in Rajasthan, and Lothal, Rangpur, Rojdi, and Dholavira are in Gujarat. Because the first big cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, were found in the valley of the Indus River, it's called the Indus Valley Civilization. It's also known as the Harappan Civilization because Harappa was the very first site to be dug up. What we know and how. We know about these ancient people mostly from things archaeologists have found. Think of it like being a detective. They found big storage buildings called granaries in Harappa, a huge public bath called the Great Bath in Mohenjo-daro, and lots of objects like jewelry, pots, statues, and special stamps called seals. The Indus people had their own way of writing, called the Indus script, but guess what? We haven't figured out how to read it yet. So many secrets are still hidden. This amazing civilization was around roughly between 2500 BCE and 1500 BCE, which is a very, very long time ago. It existed at the same time as other old civilizations in places like Egypt and Mesopotamia. Super planned cities! The Indus Valley Civilization is famous for its cities, which were incredibly well planned, like someone had drawn a map before building them. The main roads ran straight and parallel to each other. Smaller streets crossed the main roads at right angles, like the squares on a chessboard, dividing the city into neat rectangular blocks. The main roads were wide enough for big carts to pass and even had curved corners to make turning easier. They even had street lamps. Houses were built on both sides of the streets using good quality baked bricks. Citadel and Lower Town. Most Indus cities had two main parts. One part was built on higher ground, like a fort, and was called the citadel. It had strong walls around it, maybe to protect it from floods. Important buildings like public halls, religious structures, and granaries were in the citadel. The rulers probably lived here too. The other part, called the Lower Town, was built on lower ground but was much bigger. This is where the common people lived in smaller houses and buildings. Important buildings. In Harappa, archaeologists found something called the Great Granary. It was actually 2 rows of 6 big storage rooms each. This was used to store extra grain for times when there might be floods or not enough food. These granaries were built near rivers, so grain could be easily moved to boats. Near these granaries, they found round brick platforms, probably used for threshing grain, which means separating the grain from the plant. There were also furnaces where workers made things out of metal. Mohenjo-daro also had a large granary. But the most amazing structure found there is the Great Bath. It's like a big, old-fashioned swimming pool made of baked bricks and sealed with a special tar called bitumen to make it waterproof. There were even rooms on the side for changing clothes. People probably used the Great Bath for special religious bathing. Another important building in Mohenjo-daro was the Assembly Hall, a big hall with pillars where people might have gathered to talk about important things. Houses and drains. The houses in the Lower Town were often 1 or 2 stories high and had flat roofs. They were built with baked bricks and had thick, strong walls. Most houses had a central courtyard with rooms around it, and also a bathroom, a kitchen, and even a well for water. One of the coolest things about these cities was their excellent drainage system. The bathrooms had sloping floors and drains that connected to drains in the street. Kitchens also had drains connected to the main street drains. These main drains ran along the sides of the streets and were covered with bricks. They even had manholes so they could be cleaned regularly. This shows that the Indus people cared a lot about cleanliness and hygiene. A busy port, Lothal. At a site called Lothal in Gujarat, archaeologists found a brick dockyard. A dockyard is where ships are built and repaired, and where goods are loaded and unloaded. This suggests that Lothal was an important port for trade with faraway lands, possibly even Mesopotamia. How things were run. The fact that towns were so well planned, and even things like weights, measures, and the size of bricks were the same across different cities, tells us that these cities were very well managed. We don't have evidence that they were ruled by kings. It's possible that each city was run by a committee of important people like priests and rich merchants. They would have taken care of things like collecting taxes, keeping law and order, and managing trade. Life in the city, society, and food. Society likely had different groups. The rulers, like priests and wealthy merchants, probably lived in the citadel. Small merchants, artisans, people who make things by hand, and craftsmen formed another group and lived in the lower town. Then there were laborers and farmers who might have lived in smaller huts outside the main cities. What did they eat? Wheat and barley were their main crops, used to make bread. They also got oil from mustard seeds. Evidence from Lothal suggests they grew rice too. Besides grains, they ate meat, fish, eggs, milk, fruits, and vegetables. Clothes and jewelry. Archaeologists found clay spindles, which are tools used for spinning thread. This tells us that people knew how to spin and weave cloth. They probably wore clothes made of cotton and also wool. Men often wore something like a dhoti, and women wore short skirts held at the waist with a girdle, like a belt. Shawls were used as upper garments. Both men and women loved ornaments. Men wore amulets, charms to protect from evil, and finger rings. Women wore necklaces, bracelets, bangles, and earrings. Rich people had jewelry made of gold and silver, while poorer people wore jewelry made of bone, shell, and copper. Fun and games. What did they do for fun? Singing and dancing were popular. They also played a game that was similar to modern chess. Lots of toys have been found, like small clay carts, animals with heads that could move, monkeys that could slide down a string, rattles, marbles, dolls, and bird-shaped whistles. These toys were often made of terracotta, which is a reddish-brown baked clay. One very famous find is a bronze statue of a dancing girl from Mohenjo-daro. It's quite small, only 10.5 centimeters high, but shows amazing skill. Beliefs and religion. We don't find any big temple buildings in the Indus sites. The Great Bath might have been used for religious bathing. They did seem to worship images, as many clay figures of a female goddess, probably a mother goddess, have been found. Some seals show a figure with 3 faces and horns, sitting like a yogi and surrounded by animals. Some historians think this could be an early form of Lord Shiva, called Pashupati, meaning Lord of Beasts. The pipal tree also appears on many seals and was probably considered sacred and worshipped. They also found many amulets, suggesting people believed in evil spirits and wore these charms for protection. When people died, they were buried with things like pottery and jewelry, which makes us think they believed in life after death. Jobs people did. The Harappan people had many different jobs. There were farmers, weavers, potters, jewelers, metalworkers, toy makers, stone cutters, seal makers, bead makers, boat makers, masons, builders, and traders. Farmers grew enough food for everyone, and they also raised animals like cattle, buffaloes, sheep, and goats, probably for milk and meat. They even used plows to farm their lands. Metal workers, especially bronzesmiths, were very skilled and made figures, tools, and weapons. The dancing girl statue shows how good they were at casting bronze. Goldsmiths made beautiful jewelry from gold, silver, and precious stones. Making beads was also an important job, using gold, silver, copper, semi-precious stones, and shells. Pottery was very advanced, with beautiful reddish-glazed pots decorated with designs of animals, trees, and leaves. The huge brick buildings show that bricklaying and masonry were also common and important jobs. Getting around and trading. How did people travel? Many terracotta models of bullock carts have been found, so these were likely a common way to transport goods and people. Ships and boats were also used, especially for trade. The Indus people traded a lot. They would export goods they had extra of and bring in things they needed. Gold might have come from South India, while metals like copper, tin, and silver were brought from places like Mesopotamia, Persia, modern Iran, Oman, and Afghanistan. We know they traded with Mesopotamia because Mesopotamian seals have been found in Indus cities, and Indus seals have been found in Mesopotamian cities. This trade might have happened through the dockyard at Lothal. They probably traded by barter, which means swapping goods directly without using money. Weights and measures were important for this trade. Mysterious seals. Over 2,000 seals have been discovered. These are usually flat, square, or rectangular and made of clay, stone, or copper. They often have carvings of animals like bulls, buffaloes, goats, tigers, and elephants, along with some picture-like signs which are part of their undeciphered script. Merchants probably used these seals to stamp their goods, like a company logo today. These seals tell us a lot about their art, trade connections, what they wore, their religious beliefs, and their writing. The end of a great civilization. Sadly, this amazing civilization eventually declined and disappeared. Historians are not exactly sure why. Some possible reasons include natural disasters like earthquakes, floods, or diseases. Maybe the course of the River Indus changed, affecting farming and life. Or perhaps there was a change in their farming methods. Even though it ended, the Indus Valley Civilization left behind an important link to our past.